Hi, fellow Django developers. Ezekiel here from alwaysdjango.com, where we discuss interesting Django topics that helps you grow, improve as a Django developer. So, if that sounds interesting, like, subscribe, share this video with anyone you think will find this video interesting. Let's get into it. So, in this video, we are going to discuss how to create a Django project with Cookie Cutter. Right. So, what is Cookie Cutter? Cookie Cutter is simply a CLI toolkit, right? That is used to bootstrap framework projects, right? So it's not, I don't think it's specifically made for Django. It's not specifically made for Django. I think you can use it with React. Yeah, I think you can use it with React. I think you can also use it with Flask, right? So it's not specific to Django or maybe Python, right? So here we are going to create a Django. So the most important, like one of the importance of using Cookie Cutter to bootstrap project, to create projects, is that like while working on a project, you discover that at some points you get to have different like requirements from maybe your clients or maybe for yourself or any other person. So you get to find out that you need different packages, maybe some packages that maybe you didn't think you needed at the beginning. You find out that you need them, right? And when you discover that you maybe need this package, when you thought you don't need this package and later you discover that you need this package, it becomes difficult in sometimes really it becomes difficult for you to maybe make the switches, make the changes, the tweakings that are required to use this package after maybe you have made a lot of you have done a lot of things without the package that you are requiring, right? So I don't know whether it makes sense. So just Cookie Cutter is meant to create projects in the right way with the right packages and requirements, right? In the right way, production professional pattern, right? Design pattern, right? So I have opened here the Django official Cookie Cutter documentation. I'll leave a link to it in the description so that you can go and look at it, right? So the first step here, so you can look at it, but my duty here is to walk you through it. So if you are watching this video, I don't think you need to disturb yourself, right? So the first step will be installing Cookie Cutter, right? So to install Cookie Cutter, to install pip install Cookie Cutter, right? So to install Cookie Cutter, we say pip install Cookie Cutter, right? So I also leave a link to this. This is the pypi, that's pythonpipe.org page for this package, for this Django package. So we simply say pip install Cookie Cutter. So we go to our command line right here. So you say pip install Cookie Cutter, you press enter. But for me, it will probably write requirement already satisfied. Why? Because I already installed this package, right? So let me clear my screen. So after that, after installing Cookie Cutter, we'll go back to the documentation. So we say generate a new Cookie Cutter Django project, right? So we'll copy this code right here. I'll also leave this code in the description, these commands in the description so that you can go and look at it. So Cookie Cutter is just a kind of command that is used to pull in the projects, the bootstrapped template, right? So he said you have installed this, you have downloaded this before. Do you want to download again? I'll say yes, right? So it will run for you, right? It will most probably not show this you have downloaded, because this will probably be the first time you are running this process, right? So it will not show this you have downloaded this before and things like that. So what it does here is simply to bring out prompts for you to fill in. You fill in right here is asking for your project name. It will probably ask for your project version, project author, the requirements that you possibly need, right? So our project name, let's give it any name. Let's say testing cookie cutter, right? So this is our project name. Project slug, you can enter any slug you want. Let's say maybe let's leave it with the default. So the default will be the project name you enter, testing cookie cutter. You can see it here, testing cookie cutter, right? So press enter. What's the description, right? You enter the description you want. Let's say an awesome Django project, right? For instance, you press enter. What's the author name? So you enter your name right here. So I'll enter Hezekiah here, Hezekiah Chukode, right? Press enter. Your domain name, the domain name you want to deploy this application to. So right now I don't really have any domain name, so I'll just press enter. It will use the default. The default here is example.com. Then the next is your email, right? So what's the email? Maybe you enter your email right here, whatever. If you can also leave it to the default, which is for me right now is Hezekiah Chukode at example.com. So you can enter any email you want. Let me say Morgan, or let me just leave it as the default, right? So what's the version? You say 0.0.1.0. I'll leave it as that. Then here you have to enter maybe the license. It says select open license, right? Open source license. You have MIT, you have BSD, etc, right? So by default is MIT, so I leave it at MIT. What's the time zone? It says UTC. I'll use it as UTC. Are you using Windows, right? So if you're not using Windows, maybe you're using Mac, Linux, you can enter. But for me, I'm using Windows, so I'll say yes. Why yes? Are you using PyCharm? No, I'm not using PyCharm. Any, that's the default, so I press enter. Are you using Docker? I'm not using Docker, right? So I press enter. So what is the Postgres version, right? By default is 1, that's Postgres 14, Postgres 13, Postgres 12, 11, 10, right? Whatever. So by default is 1. So I just choose 1. Then choose your cloud provider, right? You have AWS, DSCP, you have Azure, right? So, but for me, is none, right? So I type 4. The fourth one is none, right? So what's the select mail service? For me, other mail service. Maybe you want to use Mailgun, Amazon SES. You want to use Mailjet. But for me right now, I'll say 9, right? 9 is other SMTP. So I'll choose 9. So use asynchronous. Maybe you want to run asynchronous codes. You want to run asynchronous views and things like that. So use asynchronous. I'll say no, right? So side note, guys, very soon I'll be uploading a video on asynchronous views in Django, how to use them to make applications faster. For me, I think they are very awesome. I think you should check it out. So if you don't know about them, subscribe to this channel and turn off the notification to stay updated. DRF, Django REST Framework. Do you want to use it? For me, I'll say no. So select front end pipeline. Do you want Django compressor GOP, right? I'll admit, guys, most of these things I don't really know them, right? So front-end pipeline, I've not used this before. I've not used the Django compressor. Maybe I'll look at it and know what it is, but I've not used it before. So I'll select none. The default is none, so I'll select none. You want to use Celery? Maybe you want to use Celery. I don't want to use Celery. I'll say no. So Mail Hop, I don't want to use that. You want to use Centric? No. You want to use Mailgun, right? Let's say, because if you don't specify that you want to use Mailgun and you didn't specify, like we did here, we didn't specify the cloud provider we want to use. If we don't specify the Mailgun, this will error. The creating process will error out on us, because for a Django project you need to use maybe white noise, right? White noise to manage your static files in production, right? Is either you select a cloud provider right here, or you select that you want to use white noise. If not, cookie cutter will error out on you, right? So do you want to use white noise? Yes, I want to use white noise. Do you want to use Heroku? Yes or no? If you know about Heroku. Another thing, guys, very soon I'll be making a video on how to deploy Django on Heroku. If you don't know about that, I think Heroku is very awesome. It's free, or it used to be free. Right now I think it's paid. A little bit of it is paid, right? Maybe $5 a month, something like that. So if you don't know Heroku, you want to learn Heroku, it's just easy for you to deploy Django using GitHub. It's really enough of the blabbing, guys. So are you using Heroku? Let me say yes, I'm using Heroku. So which CLI tool do you want to use? I'll say none, right? You have Travis, you have GitLab, you have GitHub, right? I'll say none. So keep local environment in VCS, right? Do you want to keep local EMVs? Yes, I want to do that. Do you want the debug? Let's say no, I don't want to debug, right? So this will run the process, run the whole thing, and possibly will create your Django application for you. You can see here, warning, you chose not to use cloud provider. Media files will be served in production, right? It won't be served in production. So your project is initiated. Keep up the good work, right? So we have used Celery. Sorry guys, I'm mixing up the stuffs. let's let's calm down. So we have used cookie cutter to create this project, right? So let's open this project. What's the name of the project? I don't can't remember. So the name of the project is test cookie cutter. So let's cd to that cookie cutter, right? So this will create a folder for you, called with the name of the project that you selected, right? So I've opened it here to my CLI. Let's clear this. So I want to open VS Code, open this project in VS Code, right? So I write code dot, right? So this, if you are using VS Code, you can simply open a project folder, open VS Code to a specific project folder with this, right? So code dot, you open VS Code. So let's go to VS Code here, right? Yes, I trust this auto. So let's open, right? You can see we have lots of file here. We have lots of file here. So we'll go step by step to understand what we are discussing, right? So we have .env, right? .env, if you don't know what .env is simply a way to hide project security, like project secret keys, your project secret keys, hide it away from the general public, maybe when you deploy to GitHub or something like that. So you use this env. So right here we have the .env for local, in local production, in local development process. I will have for production, right, in production environment, right? So here we have the config. The config is simply the setting, right? So here we have the set. So if you know about Django, this is your root configuration file, right? So this is your root configuration file. So in settings.py, we have the base setting. That's the base setting for application. We have the local settings for application. So this base settings for application is simply the setting, the basic setting that every environment will use, right? So if you are on local, if you want to use a certain variable, certain credential, both for environment and for both for development and for production, you declare those settings here in this base.py. But if you want to use a specific setting for local environment, you declare them in local.py. If you want to use them for production, you declare them in production.py, right? Test.py, we know what this is. Test.py simply used to run our test, right? So dunder init.py file simply to declare this folder as a Python package, right? urls.py, we know what url.py does for us. URL declaration for our project, right? wsg, this is just the wsg. If you don't know what wsg is, don't concern yourself about that, but I think it's web server gateway interface, something like that. But if you don't know what it is, you don't really have to touch this file right here, right? So we move on to the next folder. What's the next folder? Docs. That's the documentation. I don't think you have to work a lot with this. Maybe if you're working for in a big company, maybe your project manager will know what to do with this. There's the local, right? Local. That's what it is. Local, because of the e. So readme.rost, just for reading. Maybe if you want to communicate with a fellow developer and things like that. So the next here will be requirements, right? So this requirements folder, if you open it, you see base.txt, local.txt, production.txt, right? Just like the settings where we also have this base file, just like the settings where we also have this base file, this base.py. Wait, let me zoom in. This base.py, local.py, production.py, right? So this base is just settings, requirements that you want to use on both production and on both local server. Local is the ones you want to use on the local server. Production is the ones you want to use on the production server, right? So these requirements.txt file are just to tell which packages that are used in this Django project, right? So these are just simple packages. These are just packages that you are using in this project, right? If you want to use a package for production, you put it here. For local environment, you put it here. Then for both environments, you put it in the base.txt, right? So we have this test cookie cutter, right? If you remember, this is the name of our project. If you can remember, this is the name of our project right here, this test cookie cutter, right? So in this folder, this will be the name of this folder with the same name as the name of your project, right? In this folder, this is where you find your static files, right? You find your template files. Then here is the user file that contains the user migration, the user forms, the user models, etc. Right? So this is the utilities, right? If you're using utility functions like sending email function, like utility functions for your project generally, right? So the next one here will be utilities, things that you can use, utility functions like utility commands, and you don't really need to bother yourself about this. So others are the git, that's the as in helper files, the git ignore files, the git attributes files, the license files, the proc file. This for Heroku, the requirement.txt file, the runtime.txt, etc. Right? So then we have the manage.py file. How can I forget? So the manage.py file. So after all this, the next thing should be probably to to run our project. Let me zoom back out. So the next thing should be to run our project, right? So I open my terminal. So the terminal is running already. Let me close it. So the next thing will be running our project. You know how to run a project in Django. You say Python. I know how to start your development server in Django. Python manage.py run server, right? So this will error out on us. This will give us a problem with database connection and what have you, right? So because if you remember when we were setting up this project, we said we want to use Postgres, right? But we have not configured, we have not told it which Postgres database and database configuration we want to use for the project, right? So you can see right here it's saying I'm opening my Postgres here. So you can see right here, you can see django.db utils.operations error connection to server at localhost. Like it cannot connect to your database. There is no database. You have not specified the database connection string for this project, right? So where do we specify this database connection string? It should be in the settings.py file. So if we go to config settings, we go to base.py. Here you can see here we have this Postgres local test. So but there is no, this credentials is wrong. There is no database like this in our system, right? So I have this string here. If we copy this, then come back here. If we come back here and paste this, let's paste this here. I'll explain what I'm doing. So if we paste this here is the Postgres. So here is the string. Here is the requirements that you need. The connection string to your Postgres, right? If you have installed Postgres, I'll leave a link for you to install Postgres on the description, right? So if you install Postgres, here is your Postgres admin password. While installing Postgres, you will be asked for this password, right? So here is your local host. This is local host. Then here is your port, right? Your local host port where Postgres is running, right? Then here is your database, right? So let's see if Postgres has opened. It's not yet opened. So I'll leave this in the description. So that you can look at it. So what I'll do is I'll pause this video. If my Postgres completes booting up, I'll start back on, right? So after some time, after let me say 3 minutes, my Postgres has started, right? So here is asking for my password, the password I used to create this. Again, if you are creating a Postgres, if you are installing Postgres on your system, this password, you'll be asked for this password. So my password is 123, right? I press enter, right? So it starts booting. The server is opening. So you can see right here, it's opening, right? So we have the database right here. So let's create a new database for our project. So let's say the name of the data. Let's create the database. Let's say cookiecutter-django, right? This is the name of our database. Let's copy this. Let me copy this. So we save, right? So this is saved, this database has been saved. So if we go back to our project, if we come back here, we want to, here is Postgres, here is your password, here is your local, here is localhost, here is your port where you assign Postgres to run. Then here is the name of your database. So we paste the name of our database right here. So after this we say python manage.py run server, right? So let's run our server and see whether it runs and see if it runs. Fingers crossed, hopefully it's running. So you can see it's telling us that we have unmigrated migrations, right? So let's first of all do that. So we're migrating, so you can see our migration is running correctly, which means our database credentials has been set correctly, right? So after this, let's start our development server, manage the py run server. So let's start our server real quick. Go to our browser, open this. Fingers crossed, hopefully everything runs correctly, and I think it does. So here is it, guys. Here is it, and you can see here that Postgres is like our project is already using Django debug toolbar. If you don't know about Django debug toolbar, we have a tutorial on Django debug toolbar. I can add a link to it in the description. So here is our project. Our project is running correctly. Here is the home. Here is the about. Here is the sign up. Here is the sign up, right? So where can you find these templates? These templates, you can find them in this your app, this your project folder. Here in your project folder, templates, you can see account, you can see sign up.html. So this sign up.html is what you are seeing here, right? So that's it for me, guys. Probably the tutorial has been long, but I hope you have learned something. That's it for me today. If you are not subscribed, subscribe, turn on the notification, comment, share all the good stuff, and have a nice day. Take care of yourself. Peace.